So for this next section, in essence, in a lot of ways, all that's going on is you have a number in the front and it's got a negative, right? So for this next example, example number 4 on page 393, it's talking about basically the same thing, and it's very similar to what we just did for example 1. You're pulling out a greatest common factor. You're pulling out a number, especially because there's some kind of number in front of the x squared. Well, in this case, there's kind of a standard, just kind of agreed on as we're doing these, that a lot of times we don't want a negative number in front of the x squared. You'll see that as we move down the road, there's people much brighter and smarter than me that we make sure to teach this in order, because I would not be thinking about this, but many times we don't want a negative in front of this. So we're trying to simplify it and also not have negatives in the front of this. So the whole point of this is just like the last one where if we had a number in front of there, we just found the number that was there, and hopefully it was a multiple of all the other ones. The other thing that's going on here is we don't usually want negatives in front. We're trying to clean this thing up so that we can set up the parentheses, and we're just going like an x times an x for the x squared. We don't want a number in front of there or a sign. So in this case, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up basically kind of pulling out a sign, or to show you where this is coming from, is we're pulling out a -1 or just a negative from all these, which when I pull a negative from each of these, all it's going to do is just change the sign. So we're going to do an example here that's coming out of the book there, example number 4, and then we'll have a few for you to practice. So if I take a look and we kind of show you where this is coming from, I'm going to drop these all down here, kind of non-elegant style, just getting these out of the way. What's allowing us to do this, or what's going on here, is we're basically pulling out a negative, right? So -4 can be thought of as -1 times 4. -8 can be thought of as our -1 times 8. And then 5 can be written as, right, a -1 times a -5. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out a negative sign or a -1 from each of these. So if I think about this and I make my parentheses, right here, first of all, right, what's going to happen is if I borrow a -1, I'm going to take out, right, a -1 here. So if I pull a -1, I'm just left with 4. If I pull a -1 here, right, I'm just left with, there's a +8 right there, so I'm going to put the +8. And if I pull out a -1 here, or as I pull that out, I'm left with just a -5, or the same as adding the negative, the same as taking away. So when I rewrite this whole thing, I'm left with just 4x squared, and then +8x, and then plus a -5 is what I have left right there. So that's a minus, right, same as -5. And so I don't know if you can see, but if we look at this, and we move this out of the way, right, kind of showing you where this came from our original problem. All we did is we borrowed a sign and we took it out. So then, all right, our -4, right, if we borrow it, becomes a +4. -8, -8 becomes a +8, and +5 became a -5. So what we're basically doing is just pulling out or distributing out a negative sign, or it's the same as a -1, right? So we borrowed a -1. If I want to double check, make sure again this is all correct, I can just go -1 times 4 is -4x. -1 times a +8 can come out to eventually -8 or -8. And a -1 times a -5, that negative becomes a positive, or it's +5. So it does check. And in that case, I can try to see, we did last time, is there any numbers that pull out? Well, it doesn't look like 4 is a factor there, 4 is a factor there, but not 5. So this one doesn't simplify anymore. All we can do is just pull out that negative sign, or basically, when we pull out a negative, we're borrowing a negative from these, right? All the signs just flip, because when we bring that negative back through, if we distributed, that would change it back to its original problem. So it's basically kind of pulling out a negative sign from each of these, borrowing, right, donating a negative sign, which just causes the signs to flip on each of these. So what we're going to have you do is just, again, a couple of the exact same thing we're doing before. We're going to do a couple, 2 practice problems down below as we do our fake quiz.